Hey guys, I'm learning TFT, and in this video I'm going to go through the top augments for each of the best comps in the game. There's plenty of videos out there covering comps and going into what's the best itemization and all of that. So I don't want to go into detail on all of that, but I'm going to go through what are the best augments, especially when you think about what are the conditions that can lead you towards going into a comp. And then once you have a comp selected, what are the best augments around that comp, which also help us understand how that comp operates, what's the win condition, how you want to build that comp. So analyzing the augments not only helps us decide when to go into a comp, but it helps us understand how to build that comp in a way that allows that team to be successful. Before I get started, I wanted to talk about a follow-up as far as some of the comments in my previous videos, specifically about learning how to learn. Enrique kind of mentioned that he left with an existential crisis, and I asked him why, and he talked about specifically learning how to learn is a metaphor for life, and TFT is constantly evolving and changing so quickly, which is reflective of how the real world is today with AI and technology. Limcube said, the skill of learning new skills is so underrated, and that's all that's going to matter moving forward. And Isabella also mentioned, thanks for the reminder to learn. You can never stop learning enough. And when you think about challenger players, the best players are the ones that are able to constantly adapt and learn, because there's always new information, new mechanics, new sets, new patches coming out. And if you're just stuck in the past thinking that you're an expert, you're not going to keep learning. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about some Yuval Noah Harari's quotes about how schools should downplay technical skills and emphasize general purpose skills. One of the challenges, I have two kids, I have a 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and we sent our kids to a progressive school that actually doesn't even have grades. And a big part of the reason for that was, for me, I grew up in a public school, very traditional academic public school, and I got like a 4.0 in high school, except for I got 1B in art and 1B in English. So just under a 4.0. And I hated my childhood schooling experience. Like Albert Einstein talked about how for a lot of people, hopefully going to school doesn't ruin your education, because the way that traditional schools teach is basically a hierarchical top-down approach where you are, for the most part, taught to memorize. The teacher like basically lectures at you, and then you're expected to consume the information and then spit it back out. And it doesn't teach creativity, it doesn't teach critical thinking skills, it doesn't teach collaboration and communication. What that model teaches you is how to passively consume information and memorize it and spit it back out, which worked in the industrial age where you just needed an assembly line of workers to be able to follow directions. But that model doesn't work anymore, especially when you have ChatGPT and the internet where you can search anything and get information at your fingertips. It's much more important now to know how to ask the right questions, not necessarily how to answer them. Obviously, you want to be able to critically think about the answers that you might get from ChatGPT to make sure it's not wrong. But it's not that important anymore to be able to memorize information. The other thing that you've all mentioned is that in order to keep up with the world of 2050, you need not merely to invent new ideas and products, but you have to reinvent yourself over and over again. And that's really relevant to TFT, because so much of this game is a question of confidence, of commitment, of when you go through a rough patch, how do you reinvent yourself? You have to really challenge yourself to think, like when you are running into a wall, your heart's stuck. You have to reinvent yourself. You have to constantly ask yourself, what assumptions do I have that I need to let go? Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher, I believe he was a German philosopher, one of my favorite authors, said, a truth and insight which you could have thought out slowly for yourself could easily have been found already, written in a book. but it's 100 times more valuable if you arrived at it by thinking for yourself. And that's why you can passively consume a lot of this information about TFT. There's plenty of videos out there, plenty of comp guides, plenty of data out there. But when you are critically thinking about it, you're manipulating tier lists on tactics.tools. You're moving units around on tactics.tool team builder. That helps you process the information and lets you learn it way better than if you're just passively consuming the information on the videos that you're watching. And so that's why the Professor Feynman's learning technique is so valuable. And it's a very simple process. You identify whatever topic you want to learn, you summarize it, teach it like I'm 5, summarize it, make it very simple to explain to somebody that has far less knowledge than you do. You collect feedback on what the other person did not understand because maybe you didn't explain it as clearly as you could have. You simplify your explanation, and then you go back and summarize it again. And this iterative feedback loop really helps you improve at understanding whatever topic you're trying to learn. So with that said, I do want to jump into the material that you came here to learn about. Obviously, in all of these videos, I kind of want to do like a head fake into the underlying thing that's really going to help you get better. You can consume passively all of this information all day. That's not the thing that's going to really help you get better if your goal is to climb in TFT. Because all of this information that I am going to present to you is going to become stale next patch, is going to become irrelevant next set. The fundamental thing that will help you get better is learning how to think better, how to learn better. And so that's why in all of these videos, or at least when it's appropriate, I do want to kind of insert this plug for kind of this underlying approach of a beginner's mindset for how you can get better. And not only will that help you get better at TFT, but fundamentally, this should help you become a more just generally well-rounded person in life, whether it's work, whether it's school, whatever challenge you want to face. This approach to learning should help you get better at life, especially at how fast AI and technology is accelerating today. I saw a tweet about Mr. Keen talking about how it's really hard for him to find a writer's job today. And a big part of that is AI is replacing content creation. Like if you're a writer, AI text generation can just do your job better than you for the most part. Why would somebody hire you to do something AI can do better than you? And I dive into technology a lot. My wife works in venture capital, looking at a lot of AI technologies being funded at startups. And that's just true across the board. So if you can learn how to do this skill, which will help you get better at TFT, it'll help you get better at life as well. Okay, sorry about the long spiel. 1419, best augments per comp. We're gonna talk about what are the conditions to get into each comp and what makes each comp successful by looking at the augments. This is all based off of GM data. It's 2 days of data, so this is all subject to change, especially because usually after the first half week to a week, top challenger players are usually innovating at what's on the fringes and then experimenting. And so this is all subject to change. But if you're looking to play in the next few days, the next week, this is probably going to be helpful for you. So we're going to start off with Arcana Varus. And I'm going to put this like overview on the right side. And then I'm going to pull up the board on the left side here. And kind of just ignore this bottom part. You can look at it, but it might not always be updated since this stuff changes on a per patch basis. And I already spent a lot of time putting this research together. So apologies for not having the perfectly edited video. But a lot of my motivation behind doing this is kind of being a work in progress, thinking out loud, not necessarily having everything be super polished and edited, which again goes to the underlying message I want to convey to you, which is learning how to learn, not necessarily having everything perfectly memorized to be able to spit out to you. Okay, so I have broken down by silver, gold, and prismatic. By the way, this is 16% T4S is top 4 share, WS is win share, average is average placement, PR is pick rate, and WR is win rate. And I have it broken down by tiers. If something has a high top 4 share, then those comps are going to be your most consistent comps in the game that you can usually play towards by default and are not gated by a specific condition, like let's say spin to win, Wukong reroll. That's just going to have a low top 4 share, even though it has a very good average placement, because you just can't get access to that condition very often. Another thing to really keep in mind is the pick rate, because if this pick rate is very high, it's going to make it so that you're more contested, which makes it harder for you to hit. Now, this is at GM level plus. If you're at, let's say, diamond or lower, my guess is that this pick rate is going to be lower. You can go to your favorite stats site to look at the pick rate, but it's just going to be a lot easier for you to be successful if you're not contested, which is also why scouting early and seeing what items enemy opponents have slammed can give you an idea of general direction. For example, if someone has slammed IE in the early game, they're pretty much playing Varus. Like, there's not many other comps in the game that can play IE right now. And so that's one easy way for you to tell early how many people are going to play Varus. Okay, so I put a bunch of the augments that are good here, but I bolded the ones that are specifically good for the comp that we're talking about. So I'm not going to go into the non-specific augments because those are just generally good. One thing you'll notice across the board is that gold is very valuable in the first augment that you select, because so many of these comps are playing around 4 cost: Faerie Kalista, Kalista, Ryze. There's not that much reroll right now. So gold early game is valuable because you get to stage 4. Usually you do a 4-2 level 8 roll down. And if you're, and sometimes if you have more gold than other people, you can actually do your roll down on 4-1. I would recommend that if you're contested and like have more than 30 or 40 gold at the point that you post level 8. And I talked about this in a previous video. The gold that you actually save by being being first to grab the 4 cost is actually way more cost effective than the incremental interest that you lost by not waiting around. Okay, so that's one trend. So here, 3 is a crowd, 4.0, very good second and third augment pick, not so good first pick because you just don't have very many 3 costs. You'll see here that there's Hecarim, Bard, and Shen as 3 costs. So you're going to get a lot of HP value, which means that you get even more, because usually you put your Arcana emblem, or what's the thing? Signifier? I forget what it's called. You Arcana your Tom Kench, which gives you a lot of HP. With 3's a crowd, you get even more HP, which is great. Or you can move your Arcana to Hecarim so that you can get more AD, which allows your Varus to be able to one-shot your enemy a little bit better. Arcane Conduit is very good. Again, second or third is usually better because a lot of the value there is getting a 3rd item. If you have, the way it works is you have 2 items on a Arcana unit, then it'll give that unit a 3rd item. It's particularly strong if you already have an Arcana emblem, because then you get another unit that gets access to a free item. All That Shimmers is quite good because Gold Collector synergizes really well with IE. IE is Blaster's best item. It increases crit chance. Gold Collector also does a execute, which kind of is anti-synergistic with Pyro because Pyro also has an execute. But the great thing about Gold Collector is that it's amazing on Ezreal in the early mid game. So in stage 2 and 3, if you hit early Ezreal or even get Ezreal 2, Ezreal with IE and Gold Collector is amazing at farming you gold, which again, the value of gold is so important right now. And Ezreal's a perfect item holder for Varus. And then Varus, both Ezreal and Varus have AoE splash, or like Ezreal does like a wave attack and then Varus does like a explosion AoE thing. And so they both benefit from that execute on multiple targets. Arcana Crest is very good. It just if you can get to 5 Arcana, your Tom Kench HP value, like I forget with 5 Arcana how much it is. It's like, I don't know, 600-800. If somebody knows off top of their head, maybe you can add it in the comments. Again, I want to emphasize that the more you are active about interacting with this information, the better you're going to learn it, the better other people are going to learn it. And I would love for our comment sections to these videos to become kind of a discussion group. So please, please, please add your thoughts in the comments. Plus, I'm not perfect, I'm learning too. So if you see that I make an incorrect assessment about a situation, I have a hypothesis that you disagree with, or I just got information wrong, I would really love to be corrected, because then I'm just making mistakes in my games. So again, going back to like beginner's learning mindset, I love getting feedback on how I can get better too. Blaster Crest gives you the opportunity to be able to go for max cap 6 blasters. I just posted a video recently where I hit the max cap 6 blasters and in a game with like Setsuko, Malala, Soju, which was just one of the most fun games I've played. And it was just a lot of fun. You can go check out that video if you're interested. Stand United is very good because if you look here at all of the traits that are active, there are a lot of traits active. It synergizes really well with Tom Kench Arcana because the more traits active you have, the more HP you get. And so Stand United is very good. And then we have Blaster Crown. Pyro Crown is actually pretty good because if you can get that on 2-1 and start stacking Pyro Emblem or Pyro Embers, I forget what they're called, but it's like the more kills you get with Pyro units, the more your team gets attack speed. So if you have a strong opener and you think you can win streak, put the Pyro Emblem on a carry. That's what allows this comp to really win out, is if you can get those Pyro stacks early. Freaky Friday is actually quite good on Varus because Varus benefits from mana, from crit, from AD. So Freaky Friday gives Varus all of the stuff that he wants to be able to do well. Marksman's Toolbox, similar to Kogmaw, is very good on Varus, and Kogmaw is a great item holder for Varus in the early mid game. I talked about that in my early game units and tiers video recently. You can check that video out. It's better second pick than third pick because you gotta wait a little bit for the fish. I forget which one came first. Fishbones I think comes first. But with both Fishbones and Sniper's Focus, he can do his all the way across the board and just take out the enemy backline, skip the front line. So for example, against like a Rakan 2 with like perfect tank items, against a stall fight where it's really hard to kill that frontline unit, if you can just take out the backline, then they have no damage and you win the fight. Arcana Crown also good. I'm also going to talk about the best portals for each of these. And in these cases, I'm picking portals that have, I'm filtering and only selecting portals, mentioning portals here that have a better than minus 0.2 placement for that portal. So the idea is that these comps should be significantly better on these portals than on other portals. So always looking for where do you have an edge. And that's also why I only put augments here that for the most part are significantly better than their overall average. So if you look at the overall average on Arcana Varus, it's 4.5, but when you get 3's a crowd, it improves your ability to place by 0.5 placements. And so if you can see, if you do that across multiple augments, that's how you really create a cap situation. All right, so Let 'em Cook is particularly good. You get a spatula and a frying pan. The spatula, you can make a pyro emblem, and the frying pan, you can make a preserver emblem. So they're both useful. And if you can get a reforger, you can reforge the frying pan into a spatula and possibly make 2 pyro emblems. The only thing is that pyro emblem requires a bow, and you probably want like Even Shroud's better than Last Whisper, but if you just from an item economy standpoint, need to slam Last Whisper. That's one bow out of the way. Also, red buff is I think actually Varus's best item aside from IE. So it might be hard to come by that many bows. All right, so that is Arcana Varus. Next, we're gonna go into Preserver Karma. So this is a board that is kind of a stall comp that wants to anti-heal with Karma in the back and then have your Fiora and Gwen as warriors win out the fight. This comp is good in the meta because against Varus, assuming you have good items on your Fiora and Gwen, Varus usually cannot one-shot them, and then they can kind of drain tank and deal damage and heal back up. So you really need healing on your Fiora and Gwen. Otherwise, with 2 casts, Varus can usually take them out. And you can see again here, Varus has a 16% top 4 share. Karma has a 17% top 4 share. So Karma is a little bit more consistent than Varus, but Varus has a higher win share, 19% versus 17%. And then there's a big drop off after that. I didn't include win share after because the win shares are all like pretty low. And I think most of the time they match the top 4 share for the rest of the comps. So there's a big kind of spike between Varus Karma here and the rest of the pack. But these average placements are better, but some of them are more conditional. So that's why I still have them included in S tier. But yeah, let's continue with Preserver Karma. So I've bolded the ones that are specifically useful for this comp. Stationary support is good because you have melee units. Usually there are a lot more support items that can be melee support or backline support, but at the very least, if you're playing a comp with both melee carries and a backline carry, then you have a much higher likelihood that's going to be useful as opposed to having let's say you're playing an AD comp like Varus, and then you get the support dummy with Chalice to give your team AP. Like, that's not going to be as useful. Whereas here you have AD, you have AP, you have backline, you have frontline. So stationary support will be very multi-purpose and flexible for this comp. That's the same reason help is on the way is useful. Getting a support item is good. Combat bandages helps your Fiora and Gwen stay alive longer, which is again very valuable in a Varus meta because that extra healing could be the difference between, getting 1-shot or 2-shot versus requiring Varus to 3-shot you, or especially if they also have a secondary carry like Xerath or Smolder. That little bit of extra healing could make a big difference in the fight. Keepers for melee units are also very good, so that's why that's there. At gold, we have Warrior Crest. So this actually shifts the board. So if you're already building in this direction but get Warrior Crest, you can put the Warrior Crest on Morgana, take out the Karma Nasus Briar, and just go for 6 Warrior, which is particularly strong. Combat Caster is very good because both Karma and Gwen have very low mana costs, and so then they get a lot of extra shielding, which again, when you're playing against Varus and Xerath, especially, or even Kalista, because Kalista can get backline access, they really chip away at, anytime they could chip away at your backline, that Combat Caster just gives your Gwen and Karma so much extra shielding to keep them alive just a little bit longer. Aggressive, I think Preservation is what it's called, is quite good because you could play around Zillion Bard in the early game, and it's just very good for tempoing. You're playing around preservers anyway. Witchcraft Crest is similar to Warrior Crest, is you're really shifting this board to play around 6 Witchcraft, and you can then flex around either Karma or Ryze in that situation, because Karma with Witchcraft has Incanter with Cassiopeia, and Ryze has Scholar with Zoe as a witchcraft. Caretaker's Favor gives you more item components when you level to 5 to 8. And this comp is very item hungry because you have so many forecasts. You have 1, 2, 3 carries, actually 4, 5 possible carries, and 2 possible tanks. So if you can get way more items, this comp is way more valuable. If you're playing on a low item portal, and like this comp is just generally more successful the more items you have. So if you're playing on a portal that has more items, it's just going to do better. And augments that have more items. Unleash the Beast is particularly good on Fiora. It's better on 2-1 than on 3-2 or 4-2, just because if you can get an early 2-star like Warwick, or you have an early Hecarim 1, it can really help you streak stage 2. And because this comp is so expensive, streaking early and having HP lead to be able to have more breathing room in stage 4 to either hit early and continue streaking, or greeding a little bit on 4-2 and waiting to 4-5 to roll down with extra gold can make the difference between whether you're able to then stabilize and go 9 or whether you kind of just bleed out. Prize Fighter is good. Again, same reason as Caretaker's Favor. Gives you 2 extra components. You really need to win streak with this, so you only take it if you're in a very strong position. But it gives you more item components for every 4 wins that you have. So, you need a lot of item components for this board. Sleight of Hand gives HP, gives you tempo in the early game to try to win. And because you have so many carries, they can always use TGs. Prismatic, we have Warrior Emblem. What the Forge is very strong. You can get like a Blighting Jewel, Mana Zane on Gwen. You can get a Suspicious Trenchcoat on Fiora, or a what's the one that's really good on Hecarim as well? The one that like stuns them. I forget off the top of my head. You can get a Tricksters on Morgana. So lots of really good artifacts, especially if you already are playing with, let's say, Caretaker's Favor or Prize Fighter, or you're on a portal with extra item components. Because you already wanted to lean in a direction of having more items anyway, then What the Forge gets amplified value. Dark Alley Dealings is good because Suspicious Trenchcoat on Fiora is very strong. I think it might be her strongest artifact aside from the one that stuns. I'm still blinking on that. Because she can get to the back line, and then it kind of serves as an Edge of Night where it prevents her from getting killed. So let's say Varus casts, would have one-shot Fiora, but then instead of dying, she splits into 3, and then she could start chipping away at Varus in the back line. Tricksters on Morgana is quite good. She's just a very strong unit. Subscription service is good because you have so many forecasts. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 forecasts. So quite good, very flexible, and allows you to play around whatever you hit. Teaming Up gives you forecasts and a support item. We talked about why support items good when you have melee. So yeah, there weren't any portals that were very specifically good for Preserver Karma. So nothing to mention there. All right, Faerie Kalista. So this was the strongest comp last patch, and it's actually still very good. It has a 4.2 average. The play rate went down from like 1.3 or 1.5 or something down to 0.6. So most of the time you're going to be uncontested. If you play contested, this is not going to do really well usually. A lot of the value, and I suspect why it's 4.2 now, is because you're usually, if you're playing it, you're playing uncontested, which makes it way easier to hit stabilize on 8 and then go 9. All right, so silver. Nothing here that really stands out as being specifically good for this comp. I would say maybe the exception is Exiles. Just because when you're playing a bunch of preservers, that extra shield And then also specifically because Kalista wants double Rage Blade, that extra time shielded also allows for Kalista to scale up. The kind of everyone soaking that shield from exiles then gives Rakan more time to not take too much damage so that Kalista can heal Rakan really well. So that has some specific value for this comp. At gold, we have Avenge the Fallen is really good because you're playing Lilia, Hecarim, Katarina, who aren't necessarily doing too much for your comp. You could just frontline those and have them die, and then your Rakan, Kalista get AD, armor, MR, which is very good. Because especially since you have all of this healing, you have the Preserver's healing, so that extra armor, MR on Rakan just gets a lot of amplified value. Wandering Trainer is very good because if you get a Fairy Emblem from that, then all you need is one more Fairy Emblem and you can go for 9 Fairy. And you can actually get that on 8 because your trainer has one of the emblems, so you don't actually need to go level 9. So that has a very high cap out. Little Buddies is very good because early game you're playing around Lilia, Zillion, and then usually you have Tristana here before you find Milio. So that's 3 Little Buddies that gives your Kalista a lot of attack speed and your like Rakan a bunch of HP. Fairy Crest very good because you can take out like a Katarina or especially if you have the ability to get to 9 Fairy, it's very strong. And then Royal Guard very good as well. It's better picked second or third than first, just because the way it works is the more Fairy units you have alive, then you get more scaling on your Fairies. I think it gives 80 AP, just 80 AP. I forget exactly if it gives anything else. But yeah, it just performs better later. At Prismatic, we have Wandering Trainer being particularly good for this comp for the same reason as Wandering Trainer for gold. And then as far as portals go, Let 'em Cook is very good. You can get Fairy with the Spatula, you can get Preserver with the Frying Pan, or even Multi. Multi is not as good, but especially because before you find Camille, you are probably playing a Jax, so like you can swap out that Jax for something better. You can also just put the Multi on Milio to get more attack speed so she can cast her, like give your team more items faster. It's also decent on Morgana too. Trainer Golems, for the same reason as Wandering Trainer, is very good. Spatula, for the same reason that Fairy Emblem is good. All right, Preserver Ryze. So I don't think I'm going to go through all of these. I'm probably just going to go through the S tier, just because there are a few people complaining about how long these videos are, and this is already going for 30 some minutes. So I'll try to shorten these videos a little bit. All right, Ryze. So you can see that Ryze has a 7% top 4 rate, 4.4 average, about this similar to Karma, and far less of a play rate, 0.5 versus 1.3 for Karma. Usually you're not necessarily specifically angling Ryze, since Karma just usually performs better. But if Karma is super contested, then usually Karma and Ryze have items that are not too different, the one exception being Blue Buff. Blue Buff is one of Karma's best items, and usually you want attack speed on Ryze instead of mana generation, because you usually play Ryze with Force Scholar, and Force Scholar is basically a Shojin. For each attack, he gets 10 mana, so you don't need more mana generation on him, you want more attack speed. And you can actually flex between Ryze and Kalista if you slam a Rage Blade, because Rage Blade is serviceable on Ryze for that reason, specifically playing around Force Scholar. Nothing jumps out at Silver that's specifically good for Ryze. At Gold, there are a lot. Little Buddies is good because you're playing Zillion, Zoe, and before you find Milio, you're usually playing Ahri at the 2 cost, which gives attack speed, which is exactly what you want for Ryze to be able to capitalize on that Force Scholar or Shojin equivalent. Higher Education is very good for scholars, and I was surprised that Pilfer was here. I suspect this could be due to a low sample size, but as I was thinking about it more, And I thought that this should be true for like Karma as well, or even Kalista. One thing about Pilfer is that it's particularly good when you're contested because you can get the same units that someone else has. And actually, I wonder if you can even like go for a Rakan 3 if like, let's say half the lobby is playing Rakan, which at GM Plus, I think Rakan has like 3.5 players playing it per game. So if you're playing Karma, Kalista, or Ryze, just any preserve frontline with Rakan being the big one, Pilfer is actually quite good because you obviously try to position your units. Well, I guess the hard thing is that Rakan, if someone's hit Rakan 2, it actually could be hard to kill them first. Usually with the splash damage, you'll kill another unit first. So maybe it's not so easy, but in stage 4, when people are on Rakan 1, maybe it's not fully itemized. It could be easier to hit it. Plus it gives you gold, so gold's always valuable right now in this meta. Magic Wand, Ryze wants a lot of rod items because you already have mana gen. You want attack speed and damage in rod form usually. Spark is very valuable. Crown Guard's valuable on Morgana. Yeah, just lots of rods. And then aggressive preservation for the same reason as good on Karma. If you're playing around a preserver core, that can help you tempo into the late game. Nothing jumps out as prismatic that's particularly good for this comp. Frying Pan is very good because you can make Scholar out of it with a tier, and it's better than Preserver with a cloak. Because when you get a Scholar emblem, then you can play 6 Scholars. Then you just add RE, and then you could put the Scholar emblem on Morgana to help her cast faster. All right, so that covers Preserver Ryze. Next we have Portal Ryze, which is really built around having an emblem. This is more conditional. So you can see that the play rate is lower, 0.4. The average is actually quite good, 4.3, and the win rate is actually quite good. It's just very hard to get. Nothing as silver that jumps out. Gold, Wandering Trainer is very good. For the same reason as Kalista, if you can get a portal emblem, all you need is one more portal emblem to be able to get to 10, and you can get to 10 portal on 9 because the trainer has the emblem. So that has a very high cap out. Little Buddies is very good when you're playing any vertical comp. Let's say you have 2 fairy emblems, then with Kalista, Little Buddies is also good because then you're just playing your 1 cost and 2 costs. So here you have Jace, Zoe, Galio, Cassidon. I think Vertical Portal has the most efficiency out of Little Buddies. And particularly because Ryze really wants attack speed, it's like the perfect synergy. Plus, it gives you HP, which helps your whole team be able to survive longer, which helps your portal. And if you have Archangel, which is one of Ryze's best items, it gives them more time for scaling. Portal Crests, pretty much you need to have an emblem for this comp to work. It's extremely hard to stabilize on 8 if you don't have emblem. All right, at Prismatic, Wandering Trainer for the same reason. Portals, Trainer Golems for the same reason. If you get a portal emblem, it's very strong. Spatula, again, emblem. All right, last one at S tier is 6 Chrono Karma. This one, it's conditional on hitting a Chrono emblem because by default there's only 5 Chronos. It's very strong, so if you can get branching out into Chrono, it's good. Chrono Crest, you're playing around Preserver, so aggressive preservation is good. Fast Forward, very good on Chrono, but it's better second or third pick just because you don't get that much value from it in the early game, and you don't have a great Chrono carry in the early game. Preserver Crest, also quite good, especially because during the freeze time for Chrono, your preservers can continue healing and generating mana, or your Chronos. So this is just gets you a lot of amplified value, and why Preserver works so well with Chrono, and you already have the Zillion who has both traits, so it's very good. Portable Forge does very well because there's a lot of artifacts that work well in this comp. You have Mana Zane being very good on Karma. Blighting Jewel is particularly good, especially because the way Blighting Jewel works is once you hit some escape velocity of spreading Karma's curse across the board, and the enemy team's magic resist goes towards 0, then her mana bar just instantly spikes over and over and over again. And so, especially with the freeze time around Chrono and all the preservers that you have, you just have so much stall that Blighting Jewel is insanely good. Zonya is good on Morgana and Karma. Trenchcoat's good on Camille, Morgana. A bunch of good tank items for Rakan. So just very, very flexible artifact usage for this comp. And then at Prismatic, What the Forge for the same reason is good. Flexible because if you get a Chrono emblem, it's good. Chrono Crown, self-explanatory. Same thing, Treasure Golems. All right, so let's see. Maybe I'll just very quickly go through the ones that really stand out. But I won't really go too much into detail. With this is Vertical Frost, so you want emblems. When you're playing anything vertical, Little Buddies is good. Frost specific. Inspiring Epitaph is particularly interesting because every time your Frost soldiers die, I believe it also triggers this. So Inspiring Epitaph, particularly good. Lots of good artifact holders, especially if you can get Vampiric Scepter, but also Olaf is good. Spatula and Trainer Golem's good. Kogmaw Reroll. So this is like kind of a new Kogmaw Reroll that has not really been played, has a very low play rate, but the average is quite good. And if you're already playing towards Varus with Kogma, you can like kind of back up to this if you hit a lot of Kogmas and you're contested Varus. Lots of good augments here. Big gains can be particularly good if you hit a bunch of, these units early. And I believe this actually has better stats than Zig's Blitz reroll. Yeah, lots of good. And basically many of these are good for Varus as well, like all that shimmers. And if you're already playing towards like an early board, that Kogma is the best item holder for Varus. So if you're already playing in that direction and then on 3-2 you hit like Hunting Frenzy or like Category 5 or Hunter Crest, then you can shift in this direction. Lots of good augments similar to Varus. All right, Spin to Win Wukong reroll really just relies on you hitting Wukong. Or sorry, not Wukong, Spin to Win. It's only viable in that case. All right, and I'm not going to cover the B and C tier. So I hope this video was helpful. And if there are ideas that you have on what maybe I didn't get right or maybe why certain augments are better than others, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Again, the more you interact with this material, the more you manipulate the information, the more you do spaced repetition and repeatedly practice deliberate retrieval of the information, the better you're going to learn all of this stuff. So with that said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.